So New Community became, I don't know, I guess a model to some degree of creating something large and at the time very effective. Over the years, obviously it grew and it had issues. One of the key things with any organization like New Community in terms of organizing is that when you build a lot of housing and you decide to, there's a key decision you have to make, is do you manage it yourself or do you hire a management firm? If you manage it yourself, you can control the jobs and all that stuff. Of course, then you're a landlord, being subject to all the pressures and dissatisfaction landlords are subject to if they don't do everything you should do in a timely fashion for your tenants. When I first got to New Community in '98, the issue of resident organizing was one of the things that was mentioned to me. Because when I started speaking with residents, I said to them, time. And, anyway, I'll just leave it with that. One of the problems with managing your own housing is that you then become a landlord, and it makes it a little difficult.
It's an organizing tool.
So, yes. So with that, I'll sit down and we'll run my
You know, when we walked in and people were still gathering, Becky looked at the watch and he said, we could start early. And now I know why she said that. You got 5 organizers up here. And, you're right, trouble. We're going to, so we can get through this before 8 o'clock, we're going to ask the second question, which is, what are you doing today to address the economic issues in this recession? And the two, Mike Farley, who is the Executive Director of Unified Vailsburg Services Organization, and Ray Ocasio, the Executive Director of La Casa de Pedro, will speak on those that question. All right, Mike, first.
Thanks, Gerald. By way of introduction, I came to Newark in 1971 as a volunteer to help start a school. And I lived in a convent that summer with Rich Camerari. The convent's no longer there, but we are. So,
there were a few other people.
Endurance is a premium quality in community organizing and community organizations. I also want to begin by thanking Becky Doggett, who is one of my role models and one of the early leaders in community organizing and community development in Newark, and who, with others, inspired me to take this direction in my life and work. A lot of us can say that about Becky. Denise Cook of the Newark History Society is my boss, the president of the UVSO Board of Directors. What are we doing to address economic issues of the recession? The most obvious effect right now in Vailsburg is in housing. In a list from early 2009, there are 100 bank-owned properties in Vailsburg. That doesn't include the houses that are owned by the city of Newark or that are in process of foreclosure. Our strategy is to acquire and resell these houses, or to acquire and manage the houses, if that's the more realistic approach. It's really house by house, owner by owner, and neighborhood scale is key. Only 2 of over 100 buyers of UVSO houses have gone into foreclosure, and I think this is because of the agency's slow, deliberate, and personal approach, an approach that will continue. Both in partnership with Hands of Orange, Housing and Neighborhood Development Services, and La Casa and others, and in solo efforts, our work in the foreseeable future will be to get vacant houses back into active use as quickly as possible. We're in a good position for this, in part because we began to acquire and manage real estate instead of selling everything we developed about 5 years ago. I really believe that taking on the management of additional real estate is going to be a big part of our role in reversing the overall effects of foreclosures and the recession. In the bigger picture, a recovery committee made up of UVSO board members and staff has been meeting since January to try to understand the local impact of the recession and to figure out what UVSO can do. A big part of the discussion has been about housing and real estate, but there is also concern about increasing concrete needs like jobs and food and sustenance, and about the potential for more crime with more unemployment. Ideas that are in consideration include housing-related jobs, volunteer opportunities linked to expanding needs, a rental office, and more food resources like pantries and regular meals. Openness and willingness to help everyone seeking help in some way is the goal, and that's the committee's theme as we try to figure out what to do and how to pay for it. A critical factor in this is the existing 5-year plan developed in the neighborhood, in the Vailsburg neighborhood. Many of the problems and issues that are prevalent today are addressed in the plan, and we will continue to make local progress if we follow the plan. Everything in it was included with community input, and everything in it was structured as an achievable or shovel-ready project, if you will. Many plans have already reached actualization, like the development of a new 26,000 square foot preschool in the Ivy Hill section of Vailsburg, a free Abbott preschool in an area without a single preschool and an overflow of little kids. This is an important resource for families and important to the stabilization of the Ivy Hill area and the 2,100 unit Ivy Hill apartments, the largest private complex in New Jersey. Another realized priority has been the expansion of programs for Vailsburg teenagers and the creation of a teen center in the community. The teen center dovetails with the development of a charter high school application and our hope to return a high school to the Vailsburg community. This can be another important avenue for job creation in the recession and important to more and more kids gaining the skills they need to attain and work and contribute in the future. Good schools of all kinds are obvious and critical building blocks to a healthy community. And this segues into the answers to the other questions that are part of the discussion, so I won't go into that. But I think that the point that I'd like to make and to emphasize is that from community organizing come community activities, and that in UVSO and in Vailsburg, we don't do anything without consensus, without public discussion, without taking broad and wide input about what's important and what the organization ought to do. The board of directors is made up entirely of Vailsburg stakeholders who live or work or otherwise have a commitment in the community. I listen to them. My job's easy because as long as it's for Vailsburg, if it helps Vailsburg, then we're going to do it with consensus from the local community.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ocasio, Executive Director of Ocasio, Pedro, and while they were over in the convent, I was in the hills of Columbia being an organizer, so not Columbia University, but the country. But there is a great deal of context in terms of what we're talking about in terms of organizing, and clearly much of what we do as organizers comes from the labor movement and the civil rights movement. But the uprising and the rioting that we saw in the 60s really led to a change at that time that led to what is the model cities and a whole series of programs that were designed to deal with some of the pressures that were building in urban America at the time. And I think, as you've heard, there were models of organizations that came out of that. New Communities, Bed-Stuy, Casa, Ironbound, Unified Vailsburg. And many of us were premised on the concept that we were mission-driven to essentially serve our communities, to give voice to the voiceless, to provide self-sufficiency, and to, in some cases, revitalize our communities in a variety of ways. Those were humble beginnings because essentially this was, in many respects, it was virgin territory that we were moving into. If you would think back, that first housing project that any of us might have done would have been something that we would have called sponsorship, where we were lending our name, not actually building it. But today we're actually talking about building it. When we talk about lending, organizing people, what we were really trying to do was find a common enemy and gravitate people around things, not towards our goal or mission, but basically in reaction to something.